The Italian researcher, Francesco Carotta, discovered that Jesus Christ is a fable that was created based on Julius Caesar, and the Passion of the Christ is a reproduction of the funeral of Caesar. Now, we will present the facts, proving this surprising discovery. This image of Judas, kissing Jesus, perfectly represents a conspirator kissing Caesar's face, just before his murder. This happened in the year 44 BC in Rome, when there was a conspiracy against Julius Caesar, who ruled the Roman Empire as a dictator. The historian Plutarch, in Parallel Lives, on Brutus, described it like this:
They all joined their prayers to his, took Caesar by the hand, and kissed his chest and head.
The false cordiality soon turned into aggression, as the conspirators began to stab him with daggers, as shown in the picture. After being murdered, Caesar remained stretched out on the ground, for a time considered long, until 3 servants took him to the house of Caesar's wife, Calpurnia. In the city of Burcianos de Alist, in Spain, during a Mass of the Passion of Christ, a scene, that is not in the Bible was filmed, representing Caesar dead. The Mass was done on a Thursday, and not on a Friday, as it does not following the chronology of Catholicism, but the Roman sources. We see a Catholic priest, lying on the ground, and after a time, he get up. In 2005, at the Vatican, Pope Francis lay on the ground for a while. Then, the Pope was lifted by 2 religious, almost as described about Caesar. The statue Pieta, of Michelangelo, seen here, which is in the Vatican, is presented as being of Mary, holding the dead Jesus' body, in a scene that is not in the Gospels. In fact, the statue reproduces the historical fact of Calpurnia, the young wife of Julius Caesar, receiving his murdered body, as she had prophetically dreamed of, the night before. Carotta said that, in Spain, the supposed Mary, mother of Jesus, during Holy Week, is called by some people La Viuda, the widow, in English.
This is an artistic representation of Mark Antony, during his funeral speech, removing the cloth that covered the statue of Caesar, with his spear, showing the marks of 23 stab wounds. The statue was mounted on a Roman cross, called trupem, and had a swivel mechanism, allowing everyone to see it. The coffin, shaped like a temple of Venus, had Caesar dead, partially visible. Many people who attended the funeral wore masks, following the tradition of the time. This is a photo of the Passion of Christ procession, in Burcianos de Alist, with participants wearing masks. This is not in the Bible but in the accounts of the funeral of Caesar. The coffin is shaped like a temple of Venus. In front of the procession, appears the statue supposedly of Jesus, but whose origin is found in ancient traditions, based on the funeral of Caesar. The famous painting of Michelangelo, on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, in Vatican, The Creation of Adam, with detail seen here on the left side, supposedly shows Adam raising his hand to God. This scene is not in the Bible, and is similar to an older painting by Lorenzo Ghiberti, the detail of which is on the right side. In fact, the scene corresponds to a dream Caesar had, raising his hand to Jupiter. This can be proven by looking at this image, which is much older than the previous ones. This is one of the oldest images of Jesus, in which he appears as a military commander, and not as a poor prophet. In 2003, Spanish priest Pedro Garcia Gonzalez wanted to know why representations of the Passion of Christ in his church, made by young people in the village of Rascafria, about 100 kilometers from Madrid, featured events not mentioned in the Bible. He contacted Carotta, who presented the historical facts supporting his discovery. Pedro began to collaborate in the research, participated in the video El Evangelio de Caesar, in Spanish, intended to translate Carotta's book Jesus Was Caesar, from English into Spanish, and received support from the young people who joined his initiative. The youth group agreed to perform a representation of Julius Caesar's funeral during Holy Week, replacing the Passion of Christ. In 2005, Pedro Garcia wrote the following, translated.
I showed them the investigation in full, and said that the next passion we would enact would be the historical one, not the literary one. They were in agreement.
Even though everything was ready to represent the funeral of Caesar, the locals decided to follow the tradition, and represented the procession as funeral of Jesus. If the Passion were done as planned, it would attract general attention, and it would be a historic event. After Holy Week, they met again, and returned to the preparations for the performance of funeral of Caesar. They went to Rome, and visited the place known as Altar of Caesar, where the priest Pedro placed a lighted candle, and then said, translated.
There is the essence of Christianity, whose morals started there.
This inscription, on the altar of Caesar, informs that he is worshipped as a god. This photo shows young followers of the priest Pedro, representing the moment when the dead body of Julius Caesar was received by Calpurnia.
Even though it was made after Holy Week, and with deficiencies, the representation caused an impact. The photo shows the Caesar statue, ready for the presentation. The procession stayed with two versions. One is the Passion of Christ. The other is the funeral of Julius Caesar, which is the only historically true. All involved agreed with this, as they were preparing to represent it. This is in detail, from the video cited, with the statue of Caesar rotating. The group ended the performance by setting fire to the woods, under the statue of Caesar. The priest, Pedro, said, translated,
When the Eastern Church lights the pyre, everyone shouts, Christos anesti. Which means, Christ is risen.
Note that the scene corresponds to the cremation of the divine Julius, and not to Jesus Christ, who would have been buried. After the fire consumed the body of Julius Caesar, everyone who participated in the funeral was enraged, and went looking for the conspirators to kill them, but they had fled. After many events, a triumvirate was formed in Rome. The conspirators were persecuted and defeated, mainly by the military actions of Mark Antony. Among the conspirators was Junius Brutus, who corresponds to Judas in the Gospels, as both were considered traitors, and ended up committing suicide. The similarity of the names is also visible. In Latin, the word assassin is sicarius, which came from sica, meaning dagger, and Iscariot probably originated from that. Another conspirator, who also stabbed Caesar, was Cassius Longinus, who in Christian tradition is known as the centurion Longinus, who would have pierced the body of Jesus on the cross, when he was already dead. Afterwards, a legend was created, and he became Saint Longinus, also called Saint Longan, celebrated on March 15. the same day that Caesar was assassinated. The photo on the right shows the sculpture of Saint Longinus, in the Basilica of St. Peter in the Vatican. The photo shows when puppets are burned in Mexico during the Holy Week. This is a tradition coming from Spain, whose origin is in the popular revolt against the assassins of Caesar, mainly Junius Brutus. In Brazil and in some countries, this representation has changed, and became the burn of just one puppet, representing Judas. Photo of the plaque, on the altar of Caesar in Rome, with the following inscription, translated, erected for the divine Julius, by order of the people, according to the Lex Ruferina. The cult of the Divus Julius, divine Julius, spread by all the empire. It was practiced in temples called Caesarea. The cult was more practiced in the provinces than in Rome, and even more pronounced in the colonies of veterans, Philippos, Perusia, Ephesus, etc. In Judea, a Roman province, that included the ancient kingdom of Judah, and other territories, there was a transposition of names of places where Caesar has been. Galilee, whose name was a reference to Gaul, Capernaum was a reference to Corfinium, etc. The cult continued until approximately the year 70 after Christ, when it was replaced by the cult of Jesus Christ.
Carotta presented several words and phrases from the Gospels that were based on similars involving Caesar. Here we present some of those words. Carotta asked, to an audience, who said this Gospel phrase, "I came not to bring peace, but the sword." We can note that this phrase corresponds to Caesar's military acts. The old version of the Our Father's Prayer, in Spain, Italy and other countries, has the phrase, "Forgive our debts as we forgive our debtors." This phrase corresponds to a law of Caesar, that regularized the situation of many Romans, who were both debtors and creditors. This was done through the forgiveness of these debts. "Who is not in any side, is on my side." This phrase appears on page 180, of Carotta's book, meaning that Caesar, on his return to Rome, warned that anyone who at least remained neutral would be considered his ally. This was at the beginning of the civil war against Pompey, who was in Rome, and warned that he would treat as enemies those who did not take up arms to defend the government he controlled. The phrase was within a context that made it logical, but it lost effect in this similar phrase, attributed to Jesus, "Whoever is not against us is with us." This phrase even contradicts this one, "Whoever is not with me is against me." Some still try to find a supernatural meaning in them, or to assume that there was a mistranslation. Carotta went to the Basilica of St. Peter, in the Vatican, to show that there is a necropolis underneath. They are mostly pre-Christian tombs, which show principally pagan images, except one, the tomb of all the Julius, which is located in the center of the church. The Julius Mausoleum is right under the altar with the spiral columns, in the Basilica of St. Peter. When they built the basilica, its builders certainly knew it was there. The two images that appear here are supposed to be Christian, but they come directly from the cult of the divine Julius Caesar, and represent his ascent to heaven. In the following are these images presented more clearly. This image represents the apotheosis, ascending to heaven, of the divine Julius Caesar. Another representation of the ascension of the divine Julius Caesar, ascending to heaven, with horses. The nativity scenes, which supposedly commemorate the birth of Jesus Christ, are based on old stories about the birth of Emperor Octavian Augustus, who was the adopted son of Julius Caesar. He proclaimed himself Divi Filius, son of the divine, and was worshipped in all empire, along with the worship of the divine Julius Caesar. The Queen Cleopatra, of Egypt, was mistress of Julius Caesar, and lived in Rome. The fugue to Egypt, cited in the Gospels, corresponds to the fact that, after Caesar's assassination, she get away to Egypt, taking her young son Caesarion, hers with Caesar, but that Caesar did not take over. Cleopatra hoped that one day, he would be recognized as the son of the divine Julius Caesar, which did not happen. The Roman Emperor Vespasian, together with his son Titus, transformed the cult of Caesar and Augustus into the cult of Jesus Christ. Find out how this happened by reading the website below, or watching the next video.